since I'm not here today, we're going to do the notes still, but instead of you just copying the notes, I made the notes a assignment on Canvas. So when you're done watching the video and filling out the notes, you're going to be uploading the notes to the assignment to show that you followed along and you watched the video and you did the notes. So this is actually an assignment today. All right, so today's lesson is called multi-step inequalities. Just like with multi-step equations, we solve them the same way we've been solving inequalities. It's just that there's going to be multiple steps in these inequalities. So we know at this point that when you solve an inequality, you also need to graph the inequality. So if you look at this first inequality, it says 2y minus 4 is greater than or equal to 8. So the same thing as usual. We're going to look for the variable, which in this case is y. I like to highlight the variable. And that inequality sign, that greater than or equal to, is kind of like the equal sign. That separates the two sides of the inequality. So we could see that we have a 2 being multiplied to y, and we have a 4 being subtracted. And we get rid of subtraction before we get rid of multiplication. So I'm going to add 4. But just like usual, if I add on one side, I have to add on the other side. So I'm going to add 4 to the 8. I'm left with 2y is greater than or equal to 12. Divide by 2 on both sides to get rid of the multiplying, and I get y is greater than or equal to 6. So really not any different than solving a multi-step equation. The only difference is now I'm going to graph this on a number line. So y is greater than or equal to 6. I put 0 in the middle, positive 6 on the right, negative 6 on the left. I go to positive 6, I put a closed circle because it says or equal to, and greater than is going to mean that I shade in this direction. All right. All right. All right, the next question. All right, it says x over negative 6, which means division, plus 7 is less than 9. So once again, I have to get rid of addition before I get rid of division. So I'm going to get rid of that plus 7 by subtracting 7. And if I do it on one side, I have to do it on the other side. So I'm left with x divided by negative 6 is less than 9 minus 7, which is positive 2. And now I'm going to get rid of the dividing negative 6 by multiplying by negative 6 and doing that on the other side. But we hopefully should remember that when you multiply or divide by a negative on both sides of this inequality symbol, the inequality symbol flips. So it's going to end up saying x is, instead of less than, it's going to be greater than, and 2 times negative 6 is negative 12. And then, of course, we have to graph that. So I'll put a 0 in the middle, a positive 12 on the right, negative 12 on the left. It's an open circle because there's no or equal to. So I'll go to negative 12, put an open circle, and then greater than is going to mean to the right again. And I'm going to color in the arrow to show that it keeps going past negative 12 all the way to all the numbers that are greater. All right, next question. Once again, a two-step equation. All of these ones in these notes have been two-step equations. So y is the variable. It's being multiplied by 4. 1 is being subtracted, so I get rid of subtraction first by addition. Adding 1 on both sides. I get 4y is less than 8. Divide by 2. Divide by 2. I get y is less than 4. This one was a pretty simple one. I have to graph it. I'll put positive 4 on the right, negative 4 on the left. Open circle because it doesn't have or equal to. And this time it says less than, so I'm going to be shading in this direction. All right, be careful on a question like this. You always have to think about what's being done to the variable. So in this case, the variable is c. And that 9 in front of it is negative. So that's a negative 9 being multiplied to c. The 8 that's in front is positive. So remember, 8 minus 9c is the same thing as saying negative 9c plus 8. So that 8 is really being added. So I'm going to get rid of that plus 8 by subtracting 8 on both sides. I'm not getting rid of the 9 first because that is multiplication and it's a negative 9. All right, so I'm left with negative 9c is greater than or equal to negative 28 minus 8 is going to be negative 36. Divide by negative 9 now on both sides. I'm not adding 9 because the 9 is not being subtracted from C. It's being multiplied. So I divide by negative 9 on both sides. I divided by a negative on both sides. So when you divide by a negative on both sides, the symbol is going to flip. So it's going to be a less than or equal to now. So you get C is less than or equal to positive 4. And as always, we're going to graph that really quick. This time it's a closed circle at positive 4. And less than is going to mean this way. All right. Be careful on a question like this. If you notice, if you think about this inequality symbol almost like an equal sign and you separate the two sides, the variable this time is in the right room instead of the left room like all the other ones. So we have to be careful when we rewrite the final answer and we graph this. So the first thing I'm going to do, since V is being divided by 3 and 5 is being added, I'm going to get rid of addition first by subtracting 5 on both sides. 6 minus 5 gives me 1. I need to get rid of dividing by 3 by multiplying by 3 now. Multiply by 3 on this side. 1 times 3 is positive 3. I did not need to flip the sign because that 3 was positive. However, my answer is always going to be what the variable is. So if I read this right now, this says 3 is greater than or equal to V. But I wasn't solving for 3. I was solving for V. So I need to rewrite this. I need the variable in front. Now, if you think about the alligator mouth, you could see the alligator mouth is eating the 3. So when you rewrite this, it still has to eat the 3. So basically it does flip because the variable was in the wrong spot. So we're not going to graph this and have it pointing this way because it says greater than. Instead, when we graph it, we're going to have it be pointing this way because it actually ends up being less than. Because if 3 is greater than or equal to V, what that really means is V is less than or equal to 3. So I put a closed circle at positive 3. And then less than is going to mean this way. Now we're getting into more than two-step equations. Now we have multi-step equations here where there's more than 2 steps. So the first thing you'll notice is that there's like terms in the same room that need to be combined. 5x's plus 4x's is going to give you 9x's. Plus 2, 2 is not a like term, so I can't combine that. Now I have a two-step equation, or I should say an inequality, two-step inequality, because there's inequality symbols. But now I do the same thing I've been doing. I get rid of the plus 2 before I get rid of the multiplying by 9. So I'll get rid of plus 2 by subtracting 2. Of course, I have to do it on the other side. I get 9x is greater than 27. Now I get rid of the 9 that's being multiplied by dividing on both sides. And I get x, I'm running out of room, but x is greater than 3. Nothing flipped. There was no negative that I divided by. The variable is in the front, so I don't need to flip anything. So x is greater than 3. So positive 3, negative 3. All right, so open circle, greater than means this direction. On this one, you'll see that there's distributive property you have to do first. So you're going to distribute. You're going to say 3 times x is 3x. 3 times positive 4 is positive 12. And then once again, you're left with the two-step inequality. So I'm going to get rid of the adding 12 by subtracting on both sides. Hopefully this is starting to get to be second nature, solving these equations and inequalities. The steps should just be automatic. 27 minus 12 is going to give you 15. Divide by 3. Thankfully, nothing was negative that you divided by, so nothing flips. So x is less than or equal to 5. Graph it really quick. Close circle this time at 5. Less than is going to mean this way. All right. This one's a little bit more complicated because you'll notice if I separate the two sides, you'll notice there's variables on the left side and there's variables on the right side. So when that happens, we need to move all the variables to the same room. So the number in front of the variable tells you how many there are. So there's 6 x's in the left room. There's 2 x's in the right room. So it's up to you which one you move, but personally, I would move the 2 x's so that everything stays positive. So I'm going to subtract, since it's positive 2x, to get rid of it and take it out of that room, I have to subtract 2x. It goes away. I do it in the other room, so I combine it with the 6x. So I'm going to do 6x's minus 2x's is going to give me 4x's. And then this still says minus 5. And then the symbol says less than, and then I'm left with positive 11 on this side. So now I'm going to get rid of the minus 5 by adding 5 on both sides. I get 4x is less than 16. Divide by 4. And you get x is less than 16 divided by 4 is 4. Graph it. Open circle. Less than is going to mean this way. And we're done with that question. All right. If we look at this one, there's definitely distributive property on the right-hand side. So I'm going to do that first. 4 times 2x is 8x. And 4 times positive 3 is positive 12. All right. This side stays the same, 8x minus 3. And then it says greater than. Now, once again, there's variables on both sides. So I'm going to have to move all the variables to one spot. So I'm going to get rid of this positive 8x by subtracting it. Subtract it on this side. Now, you'll notice this is one of those weird instances where the variables cancel out in both rooms. They go away in both sides. There's no more x's. 8x minus 8x went away in the left and in the right. So what are you left with? You're left with negative 3 is greater than positive 12. Now, when these were equations and this happened, if this had been an equal sign, we would say negative 3 does not equal 12, therefore there are no solutions. That doesn't make sense. However, this time it doesn't say equals. In this particular problem, it says greater than. So you have to read this and you have to ask yourself if this is true or if this is false. It says negative 3 is greater than 12. Well, negative 3 is definitely not greater than 12. So therefore, we would say this is false, which means that there would be no solutions. On this one, I'm going to distribute. I'm going to say 2 times 5x is 10x. 2 times negative 1 is negative 2. Is less than or equal to 7 plus 10x. Once again, we have variables on both sides. I'll get rid of this positive 10x by subtracting it, but of course I subtracted on the other side. And once again, the variables cancel out in both rooms, so you're left with no more variables. What you're left with is negative 2 is less than or equal to 7. And we hopefully know that you can't write that as your answer. That's not the answer. You have to interpret what this means. So once again, we're going to ask ourselves, is this true? Well, let's read this. Negative 2 is less than or equal to 7. Negative 2 is definitely less than 7. When it says less than or equal to, that word or means it could be either or. So negative 2 is less than 7. So this is a true statement. So instead of saying no solution, since that was a true statement that we are left with, instead of no solutions, we say infinite solutions. Be careful on questions like this. If, let's say, you were left with your final answer, or not even final answer, but let's say the variables went away on both sides and you were left with something like this. 4 is greater than or equal to 4. If you were left with 4 is greater than or equal to 4, you'd have to ask yourself, is that true? And you would say yes, because it says or equal to. Well, 4 is equal to 4. So in this case, you would say infinite solutions. If it said 4 is greater than 4, if you were left with that, well, that's a false statement because it doesn't have the or equal to. 4 is not greater than 4. So if this was what you were left with, you would say no solution. So don't let those kind of questions confuse you. All right. That is the notes. So make sure that you, like I said, have completed the notes and you upload the PDF of these notes to the assignment so you get credit for today's assignment. Also, there's a homework assignment that's due tomorrow morning at 8 a.m. So it is a big ideas assignment. If you finish this video and these notes before the class period is over, you definitely should be starting that and then making sure you finish that for homework, because again, that is due at 8 a.m. tomorrow morning. Of course, you need to show all of your work and you need to take a screenshot of your score, all the normal stuff. And don't forget, we have a quiz on Wednesday. So tomorrow we will review this lesson along with the one-step inequalities that we did, and then our quiz is on Wednesday. All right?